Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. Most men don't struggle with intimacy because they don't ask. They struggle because asking has become the only move they know how to make. And when it keeps going badly, when it turns into arguments, shutdowns, or awkward silences, it starts to feel confusing fast. You're doing what you've been told to do. Communicate. Be honest. Say what you want. So why does it keep backfiring? That's what we're going to talk about today, because the mistake most men make when they ask for intimacy isn't obvious. It feels reasonable, logical even, but it quietly shuts desire down. What I see over and over with successful, capable men is this. They focus almost entirely on the ask without realizing how they're showing up everywhere else. And the way they're showing up often feels more like teenage or college level energy rather than adult masculine presence. Not intentionally, not because they're immature, but because no one ever showed them what emotional leadership actually looks like inside of a long-term relationship. So you get jokes that miss the mark, playful jabs that feel awkward instead of connecting, comments that were meant to lighten the mood but land as pressure or irritation. And when intimacy doesn't follow, the confusion deepens. You start to wonder, what's wrong with you? You question whether she's still attracted to you. You feel rejected even when nothing is being said out loud. This episode is about understanding why that pattern exists, and more importantly, what actually changes when a man stops relying on the ask and starts leading emotionally. Because emotional intimacy doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from how you show up. And that's something you can learn. Welcome to episode 38, Why Talking About Intimacy Keeps Backfiring for Men. When men come to me, they're usually very focused on one thing. The moment they ask for intimacy, they replay what they said and how they said it and whether the timing was right. What they don't tend to look at is how often they don't actually ask at all. A lot of men hint or they hover. They make comments. They try to signal interest without fully putting themselves out there. That usually comes from fear of rejection. If you don't ask directly, you don't have to hear no. But that dance isn't fun to be on the receiving end of. It feels unclear. It feels juvenile, and it creates pressure without the honesty. So now you've got distance, mixed signals, and tension layered on top of each other. At the same time, many men are showing up with behaviors that worked earlier in life, like joking or grabbing, trying to keep things light instead of grounded. In a long-term relationship, that energy doesn't feel confident or attractive. It feels disconnected. And here's another piece women get stuck on, even if they don't always say it out loud. Being a partner means sharing responsibility for the life you live in. Not helping, not waiting for instructions, not doing tasks to earn something. Many men will say, I did the things she asked me to do. What they miss is that she had to make the list and track everything and follow up. That doesn't feel like partnership. That feels like managing someone. And when effort feels transactional like that, desire shuts down. None of this creates emotional safety. None of it creates attraction. So when intimacy gets brought up directly or indirectly, it lands on top of frustration, exhaustion, and emotional distance. From his side, it feels confusing. From her side, it feels more like pressure. This is where emotional leadership really matters. Emotional leadership is steadiness and clarity. taking responsibility for how you show up without waiting to be told. It's being an adult partner in an adult relationship, not a hopeful teenager trying to read the room. When that shifts, intimacy stops feeling like a negotiation and starts to feel like a natural extension of connection. When men hear the phrase emotional leadership, it can sound vague or intimidating. Like it means becoming overly emotional or constantly talking about feelings, and that's not at all what this is. Emotional leadership is about how you carry yourself in the relationship. It's the difference between reacting and responding, between managing your own internal state and expecting your partner to do it for you. At a practical level, emotional leadership shows up in consistency. You say what you mean. You follow through. You don't make her guess where you stand. It shows up in how you handle tension. You don't withdraw. You don't lash out. You stay present even when things feel uncomfortable. It also shows up in responsibility, not just for tasks, but for the tone of the relationship. You notice when distance is creeping in and you address it early. You take ownership of your part without defensiveness. You don't keep score or wait for appreciation before showing up. This kind of steadiness creates safety, and safety is what allows attraction to exist over time. From there, intimacy becomes maybe simpler. Asking feels cleaner. Desire feels mutual. Connection feels possible again. What I see when men start practicing emotional leadership is a shift in how the relationship feels. It's less tension, less guessing, more ease. And it's not because things are suddenly perfect. It's really because the dynamic has started to shift. And this is important. Emotional leadership doesn't mean becoming dominant or controlling. It means being grounded, self-aware, and reliable. When a man shows up this way, intimacy stops feeling like something he has to chase. It becomes something that grows naturally out of the connection. Most men don't avoid emotional leadership because they don't care. They avoid it because it feels risky. When you've been rejected, brushed off, or met with frustration enough times, you learn to protect yourself. So you pull back, you hedge, you keep things light, you stop being direct. That's where this hinting comes from. It feels safer than asking. It feels less exposing, but safety strategies eventually become barriers. Men were raised to believe that their value comes from producing and working and solving problems and delivering results. So when something feels off in the relationship, many men default to what they know. Fix it. Handle it. Do the thing. In the home, that often turns into checking boxes, listening for instructions, completing tasks. Some men resent this altogether. They feel annoyed that the household effort seems to be tied to sex or connection. Others comply, do what they think was asked, and still feel like they're missing something. What gets missed is the deeper message. She wasn't asking for help. She was looking for partnership, for shared ownership of the life you two are building together. Doing tasks to get something in return doesn't create closeness. It creates tension. And when effort feels transactional, desire shuts down. From his side, I know it feels unfair. He'll say things like, I did what she said, I handled my part. And from her side, it feels lonely. Like she's carrying the mental load and managing the relationship instead of sharing it. There's also a deeper fear that most men don't name. If I show up fully and it still doesn't change, then what? As long as you're half in, you can tell yourself there's more that you could do. Once you're grounded, direct, and emotionally present, there's nowhere left to hide. And that is super uncomfortable. So men stay busy, and that often looks like overworking or over-hobbying. All efforts to distract themselves instead of dealing with that ache underneath. None of this makes men weak or incapable. It shows their humanity, but it does keep intimacy stalled. Emotional leadership requires tolerating discomfort without turning it into pressure, withdrawal, or performance. It requires staying steady even when you don't immediately get reassurance. It requires self-respect that doesn't hinge on how she responds in the moment. This is where many men realize they've been waiting for the relationship to feel safer before they change how they show up. And it doesn't work that way. The shift happens when a man decides to show up differently first, not to earn intimacy, not to prove anything, but because he wants to live as a grounded, responsible partner. That decision alone changes the dynamic. When men begin stepping into emotional leadership, the first change isn't usually in the bedroom. It's in the tone of the relationship. Things feel calmer, less brittle, like everyone is bracing for the next misstep. One of the biggest shifts is that the man stops waiting for instructions and he notices what needs attention. He takes responsibility for the life he's part of without being asked or managed. That doesn't mean doing everything. It means owning his part in a way that feels adult and reliable. Emotionally, he becomes clearer, and he says what he wants without hovering or hinting. And not only that, but he can tolerate hearing no without collapsing or pulling away. That alone changes the dynamic. Conversations feel more grounded. Disagreements maybe don't escalate as quickly. There's less silent tallying of who did what and more mutual respect. Another shift is internal. Men stop tying their worth to immediate outcomes. They don't need intimacy to happen right now to feel okay with themselves. They stay steady even when the response isn't what they hope for. That steadiness is attractive, and it communicates confidence without all that bravado. Presence without pressure, desire without neediness, and over time intimacy begins to feel less loaded, less like a referendum on the relationship and more like a natural extension of connection. What I often hear from men at this point is surprise. They'll say things like, I didn't realize how tense things felt before, or I didn't see how much pressure I was putting on the situation. And from their partners, even if it's not said directly, there's a softening. Maybe more openness, more ease, more willingness to engage. And granted, this does not happen overnight. And this isn't linear. There are missteps along the way. Old habits will resurface. Fear will show up again. Once a man experiences this shift, he doesn't want to go back because the relationship feels better. And not only that, he feels better inside himself. This is what sustainable intimacy is built on. It isn't just strategy or tactics, but it's actually how you carry yourself from day to day. There's a pattern that I see over and over again with men who feel disconnected in their relationships. When intimacy starts slipping, they usually don't slow down. They speed up. They work longer hours. They take on more responsibility. They stay productive. And on the surface, it looks responsible, like they're providing and they're handling things. They're not causing trouble. But underneath is something much different. Work becomes a place where effort is rewarded, where results are more clear, where competence is visible. And home doesn't feel like that. At home, there's ambiguity, emotions, and no clear metric for success. So men lean into the environment where they know how to win. They tell themselves they're doing the right thing. They're tired. They're carrying a lot, but emotionally, they're not very available. Even when they're physically present, often they're distracted, still in work mode, still checking their phones, still solving problems, still somewhere else. From their partner's perspective, it feels like distance. Like their partner isn't present with them, like she's living alongside someone who's always half gone or still at work. And she may stop reaching out. She may stop asking for things, not because she doesn't care, but because it feels pointless. And over time, intimacy fades quietly. What shifts for these men isn't cutting back on work or becoming someone else. It's recognizing what overworking has been protecting them from. Overworking keeps them from feeling exposed. It minimizes their risk of rejection, from sitting in discomfort without an escape hatch. When a man begins to lead emotionally, he notices this pattern for himself. He doesn't shame it, and he doesn't deny it. He starts staying present instead of staying busy. That might look like being mentally at home when he is at home, engaging in conversations instead of defaulting to a screen, or talking about logistics. Maybe letting moments of awkwardness pass without retreating. This is where intimacy has room to return, not through grand gestures, through availability, through being willing to be seen when there's no performance to hide behind. For many men, this is the first time they realize how much effort they've been putting in to avoiding vulnerability while calling it responsibility. And once they see it, they can't unsee it. If you take nothing else from this episode, hear me on this. Intimacy doesn't grow out of asking better questions or finding the right moment to bring something up. It grows out of how you show up in your life and in your relationship day in and day out. When you lead emotionally, things shift. And not because you're trying to get something, but because the energy of the relationship changes. You become clearer, steadier, more present, and intimacy has room to exist again. This isn't about becoming softer or a different person than who you are. It's about becoming more solid in yourself, less reactive, less avoidant, more grounded. If you listen to this and recognized yourself, especially in the overworking or checking out patterns, that awareness matters. It's often the beginning of real change. A conversation with me isn't about convincing you to do anything. It's actually about clarity. We will look at how you're currently showing up, what's working, what isn't, and whether it's something you want to invest time and energy in changing. This work is for men who are serious about their relationships and willing to do something different, not be perfect. It's not dramatic, just honest and intentional. If that sounds like you, you can book a call through my website or the link below. And whether you do or don't, I'm glad you're here and that you're listening. That kind of attention to your inner life and your relationship matters more than you probably realize. See you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.